Здравейте, уважаеми зрители! Ето ни във втората част на разговора с господин Кристиан Вагнер. В първата част говорихме неща, които горещо ви препоръчвам да видите, най-малкото защото са доста интересни, но не са много популярни и желателни в стандартните медии. Както ви казах, той е родом от Германия, но живее, учи и работи в Китай. Наблюденията му над Китай са изключително дълбоки. Паралелно с тях, с самото естество на докторантурата му е свързана с масовата комуникация, пропагандата и, може би най-важното, създаването на обществено мнение и създаването на изкуствената реалност. Мистер Вагнер, let me continue with the last question of the first part, and that was, since they are forcing us to be part of the virtual reality and to accept the virtual reality as a real reality, what is the agenda there? I mean, it's not only to go in deeper in our phones or internet or applications. Are we speaking about, how can I say, a modern colonialism?
So, I would highlight three aspects. First, when we use this new media and all these technologies, it makes us dumb. Because we cannot even focus 3 seconds on watching one reel in the TikTok. We are like more and more dumb, which makes us not aware for the real reality, what is happening around us. How the people next to us are suffering maybe, or like older is, for example. The older societies, older people in our societies, they need more and more help, but we are more in our virtual reality. So, and this numbness in the area where we have war shows us, for example, when we talk about nuclear warfare, we are not anymore afraid. When I see tanks rolling into Kursk like Germany did last time in the Second World War, which is terrible in my opinion, because 28 million Russians died because of the fascism, and now again something like this is repeating. So we are getting numb for what is happening around us. This technology makes a kind of consume ideology. Consumer ideology, like we just want to enjoy this moment. We don't think about tomorrow. We don't think about like our society, about our nation, about our identity, about our culture. Like when we think about, you asked me wonderful before about who we are, who we know who we are, and how we can keep, even we are in the system and we just follow maybe the system, let's say be a businessman, how we can keep who we are. And I think our national identity is always where we come from. Like our culture, our local culture, the local people, like every local culture in our countries has so deep history, also 5,000 of years, like Chinese history, 5,000 of years. And this long culture is actually where we belong, where we come from, and where we will always be. No matter what happens, we will be who we are, basically. And the next thing is, of course, this hyper-reality, which is like making us numb, which are like making this against this national identity, is also, of course, a money purpose. Like you just spend your money on this. And this is the topic of the so-called techno-feudalism. Varoufakis, the finance minister of Greece some years ago, he wrote a wonderful book, Techno-feudalism. It shows basically what is happening. For example, let me give one example. Years ago, in the year 2000, around this time, we buy the CD-ROM for playing the music, and we buy it, and we can use it 100 years, 200 years. It's like our property, it's our ownership. Nowadays, when we think about music, we need to make the Spotify abonnement. We need to even pay everything, like every year, the Microsoft Office. Everything in the tech industry is like dependency. Netflix, we need to pay every month. Even our home, who has houses these days? In Germany, the most people don't have their own property. They pay every month. So we work to give everything to this, let's say like a feudalism basically. Some people who have the real property, the real access to the clouding, to our data which is storage outside even our own countries, let's say in USA, we have no access, we cannot change it. The AI, which is like programmed from specific political groups, has also the bias. So everything, we have no control about our life. And in the history, we saw what happened when the feudalism becomes more and more. People are protesting against it because they want their own independence, their own property. So this is about the new media.
Yeah, but actually, what I'm understanding from those two highlights that you have mentioned, the first one is that we are stopping to feel the world, to feel ourselves, and to feel others, people, losing the connection, the real human connection. And the second part is that we are losing the option to have something our own, no matter if it's material or it's historical or cultural. So everything has been erased, everything that is part of our human being, about our deeper, the most important thing about being human. Is this the same in China, is my first question, because most of the things that we have mentioned is part of the Western idea of the world.
It's a good question. So in China, of course, the same challenge is happening because the whole world has this technological development. But there are differences in China why I'm always still see that the government and the leadership of the Communist Party of China has different plans. For example, first, when we talk about all the technologies, they are always inside China. So the nation itself has the property and within its people. Imagine the Bulgaria will use Spotify and the Microsoft and Apple, but in Bulgaria, the Bulgarian government has the control about all these programs, all this like the IT software, for example. So in the end, because the people choosing their government in our democracies, they have also the power and more control about this. So the second thing is, in China, there's now a big movement of cultural identity to counter this kind of thing.
Movement?
So
what exactly you mean by movement?
Like, of course, movement means the leadership of the country. It means the president Xi Jinping. Since he came in office, he does a huge cultural manifestation in the country, national identity. So they have like two big aspects in China, which is defining the Chinese people. Like first is the Marxist education, and second is the cultural education. For example, China is so big with the 56 minorities. There's not just the Han Chinese, which are in the big cities. They have also, for example, in the Manchukuo, they have the Korean minorities. When you go into, they have the Xinjiang minorities. They have in the South China at the border to the Vietnam and the South China. They have so many different minorities. And when you go to China, you see they wear the traditional clothes. When you go to the local cities and the countryside, they wear really the traditional clothes of their hundreds and thousands of years of back then. And they are thinking, there's so many research. Every university is now having some specific departments about the historical research of their cities. People learning who are they coming from, who they are. But at the same time, the communist concept doesn't mean something like cultural elimination or something like this. Of course not. Instead, in the opposite, the party wants basically that the people find again who they are. But it's a contradiction, of course, because the technological development continues. And if you live in a big city with 24 million people, sometimes you just escape your reality. And you become numb escaping your reality. They have the same problem, but the daily discussion and the everywhere about the cultural identity is very, very dominating these days to counter also this development.
Okay, so you're telling me that they are, how can I say, not digging, but researching the history in order to build the future. Am I understanding right? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Chinese people have this kind of thinking. One calligrapher, I give an example. One of my friends is a very famous calligraphy artist. Mm-hmm. Calligraphy like the science. Mm-hmm. By the way, it's interesting that in our country we don't have artists for own national calligraphy, but it's another topic. So I asked her, why you always write the calligraphy like the old history, like 1,000 years ago? Why you cannot just do your own style of calligraphy, something innovative, something individual by yourself, your skills? Because she always draw the really historical. She say, to make the future, to give a part of the future, first we need to learn where we come from, what is already existing, and then when we learn from the history, we can build the future. Because also history repeats. so we can make from the historical back then create the future. So that's why also when we think about China, oh, it's not innovative, it's not innovative. Chinese just value a lot the history so much. So they need to make the perfection of the history. So they want to make the perfection of, let's say, Western technologies first, which are historical long, and then they can do the innovative step after learning the history.
Mm-hmm. So they are accepting the time, and they're thinking about the time and the agenda in an absolutely different way, comparing to us. But where is the Marxism in that whole idea that they are building here?
That's a really wonderful question, because we have Marxism and communism is one of the most distorted realities we have in the world. Like, we can just think about the left groups in our countries. They are like, you know, supporting the LGBTQ and something like against Russia and smoking the cannabis. Yeah. And then they're saying they are like against the fighting for our class or something like this, but they are all students or like the pensioners. Like, so it's very, very strange what is happening in the Western communism. So before I talk about China, let me talk a little bit more about this, because we all know these left groups which are crazy with their like the agendas and so ideological. Also, for example, this typical thinking, communism is like Robin Hood, take from the rich and give to the poor and everyone is equal. And here I go on into the Chinese socialism. So back then, Mao Zedong, of course, the socialism and the communism was introduced from the Russia and from the Soviet Union, based by many scholars from them. But China always understand there is not like one communism or one socialism in the world. Every single country in the world, same as we have national identities, national cultures, we also have our own idea of socialism or communism, our own democracy. So they understand this. And Mao Zedong said, even let's say about the class struggle and everything like this, it's not in his book about the correct treatment of contradiction in society. He said, it's naive to think that we can make everyone equal. It's more about learn how to treat each other and how to take care about each other with these contradictions. It's about how to live with contradictions. It's also kind of Confucianism and harmony between the people. Instead of fighting each other, let's find the solution how we both can win together, have the win-win cooperation. So China, since Mao Zedong, during the resistance of the Japanese people against the Chinese people against the Japan attack, they always understand they need to create their own development of own socialism, own theories. So since Mao Zedong, like in the foundation of the People's Republic in the 1st October 1949, until today, there are different leaders, many different academics who develop their own socialism in their own reality, means their own culture and also own economy. So, for example, Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s, he made the opening up, the capitalist, market economy, and it's still socialism. Why is it still socialism? Because they just very brilliantly understand, same as the West understand, when they use in the shareholders, let's say BlackRock and everything which is controlling the companies. Even if you see, let's say, in our own countries and the biggest companies, who are the shareholders? It's mostly Western. And China understand, okay, every company can be in China, but who are the shareholders? It's the government. So when you see there all the joint ventures, like 51% of the country's companies, 51% shares of the companies are always the government shares. So there cannot be a control of foreign influences because the government has always the 51%. So there cannot be a takeover. So, and communism basically developed, as I said, more and more over the years. And for example, nowadays, Xi Jinping make this so-called socialism with Chinese characteristics, he called it, in the new era. Or also the modernization of socialism in the new era. Means Xi Jinping especially was implementing this cultural identity hugely as part of Chinese socialism. And socialism everywhere in China means basically serve the people. Means it doesn't matter, like also a quote from Deng Xiaoping, it doesn't matter if a cat is white or black, the cat should just catch the mice. So the Chinese think pragmatic. If capitalism, if free market economy is making people happier, and is making us richer and is making the people have more food is the best way. It's not about the planet economy and not planet economy being Robin Hood. No. It's about working all people together, like the rich people, the like individuals, the party, the military, even to solve the problems together and use the most efficient way. If capitalism is now very fast and very efficient, then they use it. If tomorrow they understand, okay, we need the planet economy in the whole country, stop free market, they will do it. If it's helpful for the economy. So this is how they think. It's not about putting one concept in our mind and say this is the only truth and the only right way. No, it's about every moment you need to check what is the best option and you choose it. So this is how Chinese thinking is. It's very pragmatic and it's influencing until today. And there's so much Marxist literature, so many books of even the Xi Jinping in person, which developed this Marxism. So when we see now China, it's a very new construct. And also when we talk about propaganda, like in the first episode, what I can observe from the most media and the rest, they don't really understand what is Chinese socialism about and this big understanding of the development. Because in the West, we also learn. We just change if something big is happening. We need a war, we need some unification, we need many people die, and then we say, okay, maybe our way was not the right way. So we want to keep the system as long as everything is destroyed. So in Chinese think, okay, tomorrow reform, next day again the reform. We need every day change, because the economy, world economy changed, so we need to change. And this daily pragmatic thinking is a very Chinese characteristic.
Okay, that was very interesting. Obviously, you have thought about this a lot. But the question that when we are making so many changes, here in Europe, we are making changes all the time. We are trying to adapt to the world economy and the world changes, but obviously it's not happening the same way. Is this because of the order that we have in China, the mindset of the order? Is this the key moment? And if there is such an order, are the people there free? Because usually the things that we know about the communism is that people are not free.
It's a wonderful words because since I came to China, everyone say, are you free? Are you allowed to talk freely? Free speech, blah, blah, blah. So I can say Chinese people are more free than in the West. For example, I think there are two freedoms which are like dominating our perception. First is, for example, the freedom of speech. Let's start with this. So we say in the West we have the freedom of speech, and in China they don't have. But how do we have really the freedom of speech in Europe? If we are saying, for example, the Russian war, if we are publicly saying, I don't support attacking Russia, I don't support Ukraine, let's say, or other side, like if we talk against our, like, you know what I mean. So when we say like this, probably just talking now like these words by myself as German in your show will probably damage me. Like if someone one day, one employee will, like one boss will see this, and I will try to find a job in Germany, they will say, he likes Russia, he's bad, he's evil, something like this. So this kind of freedom of speech doesn't exist these days in the wartime. And in China, we can categorize between activism and professionalism. For example, activism, what is activism? Let's say I feel angry about the government and I go to the protest, but actually I have no idea what is going on, and I'm not an expert. For example, let's say some economy is bad and the government is making wrong decisions, and I'm just protesting with my emotions without having the real understanding. So this is the activism when you are not an expert and you're just protesting. So this activism is kind of it's kind of not well seen in China, I need to say, because China is always the high, expert level discussion. If you have a problem, you can, of course, criticize the government. For example, there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hotline service in China. Everyone can call the government and just say the problems they criticize on the government. I even visited the hotline service. There are like 1,000 people on the phone the whole day and talking with the people about getting the feedback. And they're even sending people there to their locals, to their district, to the streets to solve the problems they have, even if it's just sometimes some older elderlies calling for some help. So they have this kind of hotline service to get the critics, the emotions. But for the real protest and the public discussion, China is a country where they focus very strongly on the professionalism and the professional debate. For example, let's say a professor who criticizes something in the government, he gives the solution on the academic level, something like developing the country. It's well seen. Like mostly the professors are the most criticized, the academics, because they do the research, they have the practical research, and they're criticizing the government on a high level with the suggestions. So this critic is everywhere, and you can criticize a lot because it's productive and it gives the real solution. But if you just criticize the government because of your feelings, like, I don't like you because I feel you're bad, this is something just the Chinese, they don't like it because you kind of cannot solve it as expert, why you need to be like activists, something like this. And but on the other side, there I saw even like, the protests and the pandemic. And it's very interesting. So in China, people can also go to protest. But different than in Europe, when you go to the protest and nothing will happen, you're just angry. In China, directly the leaders of the district or the president of university or the president of the leader of the city, they will go to the protesters and discuss with them. And they will listen to them and they will solve the problem directly. Because protest happens so rarely, just if something really messed up. And the government takes it very seriously because you need to understand they have 100 million party members. Basically, everyone is a member of the party in China. You cannot just say like 1,000 members, something. Everyone. You can just go in the street, probably in Beijing, almost everyone is a party member. So if their own people protest, means there's something very wrong. So it almost never happened because they already have this communication lines, so they can already report the problems. This is a very, civil servant society. So if they protest, then mostly it will solve directly because also they have this face losing in the society. Means it's very important to be always professional, not do wrong things. If you do your job bad, you will lose your reputation. This reputation thinking is very, very important. If our leader like Ursula von der Leyen do the corruption, nobody cares. Media talks about it, she will not lose her face. But if in China something like this happens, corruption, the person will lose his face, will lose his career, like everything. So they are very serious about the professionalism and not just activism. And also when we talk about this kind of, it's cultural, maybe for us it's difficult to understand, but it's very cultural related hundreds and thousands of years. It's nothing just about the communism itself. For example, also the topic of freedom, like let's say many people say, oh, there's so many cameras in China, you get to observe. I can say there's no criminality in China and people feel safe. At night, you see children play the badminton at like 11 p.m. in some parks. In Germany, I will not go at 11 p.m. alone in the park, especially as a child. I will be afraid someone will like kill me or something like this.
Especially nowadays.
Especially nowadays, yes. So they have this high security, and for them as a collective society, the security feeling is much more important than anything. Because you don't need to, if you have the security, if you have a full belly, if you have a good job, what do you need else? You can have just a free life and do whatever you want and can travel and everything. But if you don't have security and need to be afraid every day that someone will stab you at night, if you have an empty belly because you need the food, like let's say in Africa or something like this, and if you have not even a house or a job, you just think about this. Every day you think, I need money, I need to solve it. So this is for China the most basic safety, stability, and then this individual thinking about, I want to feel, explain my feelings and go and cry in the public. This is something you can do at home, like, but like it's very untypical in China, yes.
Mm-hmm. That was very interesting introduction of what exactly is the life in China and how the society, all the time you were speaking about society, we know the difference between Europe, where everyone is like the center of the world, and the idea of the whole society as one in the East countries. We can continue, and we should continue talk like this. Right now, our time is over for this interview, for the second part also. I truly hope that we will continue our conversations I assure you that our public will be pleased to hear more from you, especially when you're explaining and making such a very close, very easy to imagine and to understand how exactly the things are more simple that they're in the virtual reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you also very much.
Уважаеми зрители, това беше разговорът ни с господин Кристиан Вагнер. Надявам се да ви е харесал този разговор и този разказ за това какво е Китай. Много се надявам по един или друг начин да отделите едни 2 минутки, да си помислите добре ли е? Добре ли живеете? Добре ли живеем ние? Къде сме ние? Защото като че ли на нашата държава ние отива това, което се случва, на нашето общество също. Продължава твърде дълго време, както казахме в първата част, това води до риска да забравим кои сме, а едно от нещата, които нито нашата история, нито нашата държава, нито нашето бъдеще заслужава. Това беше предаването конкретно за тази седмица. Ще се видим отново следващата.